Computer on.
We go for launch.
5.
Quiet, numbskulls. I'm broadcasting.
Anything can happen in the next half hour.
4.
My friend, we cannot keep this a secret any longer.
This whole thing is insane.
3.
Quiet, please. I am analyzing.
Where's the kaboom?
2.
There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
1.
December 1965. Is that all it has been since I inherited the world? Only 3 years. Another day to live through. Better get started.
Greetings, my fellow galactic travelers, and welcome back to Planet 8. This is your Mission Commander Larry speaking to you from our hidden base. Chief Engineer Bob is here by my side as always in the command center, and circling Planet 8 in our orbital spy satellite is Reconnaissance Officer Karen.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Planet 8 Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about The Last Man on Earth, The Omega Man, and I Am Legend, what we fondly call the last Omega Legend on Earth. Straight away, we're going to kick it over to Chief Engineer Bob to give us a little background. Before these movies were made, there was a novel that was written. Chief, take it away.
In 1954, the original novel I Am Legend came out by one of our favorite authors, Richard Matheson.
Oh, yes.
Now, Richard Matheson, of course, was responsible for things like Prey, which became the Zuni fetish episode of the Trilogy of Terror.
Right.
He also was responsible for a few Twilight Zone episodes and some other things that they came out of his brilliant mind. But when he did this novel, it was sort of intended to be a modern-day vampire novel. Because up until then, vampires were gothic and supernatural, and he tried to bring the vampires into more scientific terms. So they were created by basically a bacteria, and the bacteria had a weakness to sunlight or to light, and also to garlic. But it wasn't the vampires that had the reaction, it was the actual virus or bacteria. So, the antagonists, if you want to call them that, were basically fairly normal-looking people that had been infected by this bacteria. And in the novel, there were actually two different groups. There was the group of people that were living and got the bacteria, and then another group that were dead and revived by the bacteria. So the ones that were basically living were starting a colony and getting organized. The others that were basically brought back from the dead were the ones that were banging on Neville's door and trying to kill everybody, and they were more kind of vicious and feral. But the novel, about 10 years later, was adapted into the Vincent Price film The Last Man on Earth, which actually was a co-production between the U.S. and Italy. And if you look in the writing credits of the movie, Richard Matheson actually did the original screenplay for it. But they had other authors come in and writers come in, and there was so much that was changed that he did not want his name in the credits. So he's actually there as Logan Swanson.
Right.
So if you look in the credits, you see Logan Swanson. That's actually Richard Matheson, but he pulled an Alan Smithy and decided to go with a pseudonym. So, so that brings us into the movie. What did you guys think of Last Man on Earth?
It's one of my favorite Vincent Price movies. It's not... maybe because it's black and white. Maybe it's because it was back in the 60s. Maybe it's because it was in Italy. But it just has more of a horror picture feel to it. Burning the bodies in the open grave and, trying to find his, spoiler alert, is looking for his daughter, not wanting his daughter to burn, and burying his wife because he doesn't want his wife to burn, and the wife coming back and, let me in. It was just, I don't know, had that kind of feel to it. What did you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, that scene was basically, it was from the book, where he buries her and she resurrects and comes back. And it was one of the more chilling scenes in the movie, definitely.
I think it's interesting that originally Hammer got the rights to the book, and boy, I would have really liked to have seen a Hammer production.
That would have been interesting.
I Am Legend, but I'm not sure exactly. What I had heard was that there was some sort of issue with, and it's hard to believe that they would have gotten such a restrictive rating if they used Matheson's original screenplay, and the violence would have been so over the top that they didn't go with it. But for whatever reason, Hammer, they let go of the rights. And then we wound up with this Italian production, which, unfortunately is a very low rent production. Now, in some ways, that almost lends it an aura of verisimilitude, because it feels almost like a documentary, much the same way like Night of the Living Dead almost feels like a documentary. And of course, Romero was heavily influenced by this. I do feel of the three films we're going to discuss, it's the most horrific of the three in atmosphere and the creatures that in this one, Robert Morgan, not Neville, encounters. Why they changed the name, I don't really know.
Because it sounds cooler to go, Morgan.
Morgan,
open up, Morgan.
But yeah, I mean, this movie was really creepy. I remember seeing it as a kid, and what was funny was I forgot most of the movie. At a certain point in my teen years, I kind of forgot most of the movie. I forgot the name of the movie, but that scene where they had these huge pits where they were dumping the bodies, and there was just this like smoke rising out, was stuck in my head, and I kept remembering that scene, and I started to wonder if, like, did I really see that in a movie or did I imagine it? And for years I was like, where did I see that? And then I finally saw the film again, and it was like, oh, eureka, there it is. And it was just as disturbing all over again.
Yeah.
Well, I was just amazed that he could keep that fire going for 3 years.
It's a lot of lighter fluid. And
Oh yeah, well, you see him like pour the gas can in there before he dumps one of the first bodies.
Well, maybe that bacteria is really combustible. I guess it is, because the sunlight, is very explosive.
And then that was kind of another interesting thing about the novel too, was that it explained that if one of the, I don't know if you want to call them vampires or ghouls or whatever, we'll say vampires for now, if they get a small wound like a bullet hole or a stab, the bacteria could actually heal the skin. But if it was a larger wound, it couldn't. And that's why Neville was going around with stakes, because he'd pound a stake in it and make a larger wound. And then also the bacteria would escape and eat the body, which would basically make it look like a vampire, getting stabbed, with a stake and disintegrating.
There was a throwaway line as he was whittling one of the stakes where he says, he makes them larger at the end so that the wound won't close. But he didn't get into the bacteria thing and stuff. So,
well, it's probably kind of a holdover from Matheson's screenplay.
Well, and certainly this film keeps a lot of Matheson's ideas, and the one about the new society that is forming and that is going to supplant the human race. I mean, basically, Vincent Price Morgan is the last remnant of that old society, and he is the boogeyman to them, which was this whole idea in the book, was that, he's going around and he's, basically killing them, while they sleep, and he's terrifying to them, and just as like they're terrifying to him, he's actually the one going out and doing all this killing and wiping out this, this new society that's being formed. Because like you said, there's the ones that are mindless, but then there's that whole group that is actually, conscious and forming a new structure and everything. And that was kind of a really interesting concept. And you can see, Price does he overcomes a lot of the limitations of the production in this with his acting. And at the end where he kind of realizes it, he's still like he won't admit like what he's done. He's like, I'm still a man. I'm a real man. I'm a human. And it's interesting to see that was the only film that really kept that concept intact.
That's a good point.
Well, that's the question with Morgan or Neville or whoever. Are they actually superior, or are they just the outcast that hasn't evolved into, a form that would survive this apocalyptic, landscape?
Mm-hmm.
Was it the next evolutionary step or whatever? And
yeah, I mean, was he resisting evolution or what?
Right.
Now I know in the novel, like towards the end, he's captured and put into a cell, and he realizes that they're going to execute him, and he would be like the martyr or quote legend. And the woman that he takes in, who in the novel was a spy for the group, she gives him some drugs that he could take, basically, that will kill him before they get to execute him. And that's actually how he finishes himself off, so that, they can't make an example of him or whatever.
That's a bummer.
Well,
I mean, they all die in the movies too, so.
Yeah, but they fight and not, I guess, I guess there are fans of the book, obviously, and who knows, maybe at some point we'll see an adaptation that has that ending in it. But
well, supposedly there is an alternate ending of I Am Legend that's closer to the ending of the book. A deleted scene.
I will say, sorry, what was that, Chief?
I said a deleted scene or an alternate scene or whatever you want to call it.
Oh, yeah. I will say a lot of the fun that I had with this movie later in life, when I was a kid, Bob Wilkins, the Creature Feature Show, showing this, and the guy going around, Morgan, it just creeps me out. Even now, watching it as an adult, that did kind of disturb me a little. But I think this is one of the fun movies that Vincent Price put out there. Good acting, good story. Like I said, whether it was filmed in Italy or just added to the whole dread of the piece, one of my favorite films, definitely top 50.
Even the fact that it was black and white in the 60s. I mean, by 64, most movies that were coming out were all in color.
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously they wanted to save money or whatever, but I think the black and white definitely gives it more of an atmosphere. And again, it was definitely a big influence on George Romero and Night of the Living Dead, and even Stephen King was saying it was an influence on him.
Right. Yeah, you definitely see that. I will say there was a colorized version on one of the streaming channels, and I watched about 5 minutes of it, and I was like, nah, where's my DVD?
Yeah, no, that's kind of like one of those movies you can't colorize. Just leave it alone.
Exactly. Well, so let's go ahead and jump in the Planet 8 time machine, and we'll move forward to the Omega Man. Walker, when was that film put out?
Well, Larry, the Omega Man came out in 1971 and starred our friend Charlton Heston, Chuck Heston, to those of us who knew him well. I have a real fondness for Omega Man. I have to say, it was one of those 70s movies that I saw a bunch of times, kind of like Logan's Run. Some of these films, it just seems like became part of the DNA. But unlike Last Man on Earth, they changed a lot in Omega Man. And I think, after doing a little reading and watching some video and stuff, a lot of that was to suit Heston, I think, who, was still a pretty major star. I think he wanted much more of an action vehicle at the time, and so you get him, driving around in a Mustang convertible, shooting up Los Angeles, which is pretty entertaining, I have to say. But, in this version, it's interesting to see the stuff they kept and the stuff they changed. So he's Colonel Robert Neville, who is also a doctor, but he was a military man in this thing. And the whole cause of the plague, or whatever you want to call it, was a biowarfare weapon that was used in a war between the Chinese and the Soviets, and somehow, got around the world. And so Heston's character was working on a vaccine, but before it could be deployed, he was in a helicopter. They were transporting these experimental vaccines, and his pilot got affected by the virus and started choking, and the helicopter crashes. And so, Heston is left with the only sample of the vaccine, and he injects himself. So he becomes the only person who's immune to this virus. And, another big difference in this film is the fact that they're not doing the vampires, scientific or otherwise, that were in the books. The people in this are basically, if they didn't die out, they mutated into these sort of albino people who were, affected by light. So they had to hide in the buildings and only come out at night. So that was the closest they got to sort of the vampire angle. But they basically became Luddites. They hated technology. They hated science. And they were led by sort of their equivalent of like Walter Cronkite, this guy who was the top journalist, played by Anthony Zerbe. So this guy who was a figure that they trusted and everything turns into, this cult leader. And they even call the group of people the family, which back in 71, you hear the family, you think of the Manson family, right? So
yeah, that was a little too close, I think, in time to do that, but interesting choice.
But so, Heston is trying to put these people down. He just looks at them as like pathetic wretches. And I think part of it, too, is it's a battle between the last remnants of civilization. You see in Heston's home, he's got all these great works of art, books and everything. He plays music. He has a generator and stuff, so he's always playing music. So it's all about culture and learning and civilization. And then these guys, the family, are out there destroying books and paintings and sculpture. So it's that battle between society and civilization, and this regression in this one. That's where it's really at.
Well, and not just art and technology, but he had a very decent wet bar in the corner there, I might add.
Yeah, and he had this nice crushed green velvet jacket too before. Yes. That was insane.
And his statue of Julius Caesar,
mm-hmm.
that he plays chess with. But yeah, I mean the big difference between the Vincent Price character and the Charlton Heston character, or Morgan and Neville, is Heston's like going out, like you say, driving around in a Mustang. He goes off into a car dealership. That's how he gets the Mustang. He goes into a car dealership because his other car ran out of gas or whatever. And he just takes another car, off he goes, hangs out in a movie theater watching Woodstock for probably the 400th time. And he's out like, hey, what are you going to do? I'm the last man around, and I've got all this stuff I can enjoy. And so he's killing the family during the day, but for the most part, though, he's out there and I don't want to say enjoying himself, but entertaining himself anyway.
Yeah, I don't think he takes any real joy in any of the stuff he does, but I think he's taking advantage of what he can do, right? It's like, yeah, I'll just take any car I want. I'll just take any clothes I want, but there's no real joy in it. And there's one moment where you think maybe the guy is like about to go completely cuckoo, where he's in the middle of the street and he thinks he hears the phones ringing, right, and he has to like get a grip on himself. But that's about the only time they really let you think maybe the guy is cuckoo. I mean, he talks to himself, but I think after 18 months of pandemic, we're all saying, who doesn't talk to himself? So yeah, he's definitely in a better place mentally, I think, than Vincent Price was.
Well, see, if you're you're in like the pandemic, whatever, you're talking to yourself, that's when you need a dog. And Heston was the only one of the three that did not have a dog.
Right.
No, this is true. And I think the thing about Heston's film, too, is that, yeah, there's that much more of that thing, that culture war thing going on. And then they also brought in Rosalind Cash as Lisa, who becomes a love interest. You don't really, I guess Price sort of has that relationship, but it doesn't feel really that strong to me in the other film.
Yeah, it's not really that romantic. In the novel, they got romantic. And in Omega Man, they got romantic.
Yeah.
I think the sort of version to the garlic that kind of threw Vincent Price off.
Well, you'd probably react the same way if someone just came up with a big bunch of garlic and stuck it right in your face.
But it was also kind of daring back in the 70s, too, to have that interracial relationship.
Yeah.
We don't think much about it now, but back then, that was a little bit unusual.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. It was funny. I mentioned this before we started recording, but I'd read an article where Rosalind Cash, everyone is aware of Charlton Heston. I mean, he'd been in a number of major films, and she's like, I just had the hardest time getting my mind around, I'm going to do it with Moses in one of the scenes.
Yeah, that must have been, I think it was a lot for most of those young actors to be working with Heston,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it might be the time, too, but like Vincent Price didn't really have the romantic relationship. And then even Will Smith really didn't have a romantic relationship. Of course, that woman had a kid with her, so the opportunity may not have been right. But
once we get to that film, I mean, let's finish with Omega Man. I had a problem with the family, but I did like that they had, it was like a counterculture kind of message within the film. Him sitting there watching Woodstock, and what do you guys think he thought of Woodstock? Did he wish he was there, or was he looking at him like, you damn hippies? Or
I think he just missed. I think he missed people. And he just saw these young, healthy people, and
having good
that
time.
was
the way it was.
The attraction.
Yeah.
Well, here's a question. If you were the last person on Earth and there was a movie theater there and you had to watch one movie like 400 times, what movie would you want in that theater?
Could it be any rated movie?
Are we going into Planet 8 After Dark now? Or?
Oh, no. I was just...
Yes, it could be G. It could be Bambi.
God, I have such a wide palette. I mean, I love Disney's animated Beauty and the Beast film. It has musical elements to it. I also like Bedknobs and Broomsticks, another Disney classic. But, Star Trek The Motion Picture would be a good one. Logan's Run, Omega Man. That's a hard, to nail it down.
Yeah, but Omega Man would hit too close to home in that situation.
Yeah, I think
I'm just watching myself on screen all day.
What are you thinking, Walker?
I'd probably want a comedy, maybe a screwball comedy, something just really light and silly. I don't know which or what, but that's my general thought.
Something with some music in it, maybe?
Maybe.
Oh, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like movies I've seen a bunch of times and haven't gotten bored of. I think Holy Grail I can watch over and over.
Maybe I'd watch Excalibur.
Dun, 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 dun,
Land and the King are one.
But it doesn't have the Camelot number in it.
That's okay.
Yeah. I'm thinking, musical's a good idea. But for me, it's between Saturday Night Fever and Grease.
Oh, God.
Holy smokes.
It was really like... it's kind of like Red Dwarf, where they had to keep Lister sane. And so rather than giving him his best friend or his girlfriend, they brought up the twerp that bothered him the most, Arnold Rimmer, to help keep him sane. So I'd have to watch something that kind of like irked me a little so that I could remain sane.
Well, that would be Saturday Night Live then, or Saturday Night Fever.
But yet with Grease, I could sing along. So... I don't know. Yeah.
All right. Well, sorry I asked. Okay, so back to the Omega Man.
Well, but thinking of musicals, that brings me to the soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
Ron Granier, and my God, I just love the soundtrack. I know some people say, oh, it's dated, it's too 70s, but man, it's a distinctive soundtrack. And it just, I don't know, it's just very, very cool. Well, I will talk about it a little more later, but it's a really good soundtrack. And he also, I was surprised to learn that he had done the theme for Doctor Who and The Prisoner. So
he worked on other properties. He very talented individual.
Was he British?
He was Australian.
Oh, okay.
Well, and I'll never forget, I think it was one of the first Monster Paloozas we went to, Larry, on our plus day before the actual show, driving around LA, and we were playing the Omega Man soundtrack.
Yeah.
And it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect.
Yeah, I don't have the Omega Man soundtrack, but I do have a soundtrack for Last Man on Earth.
Ooh.
didn't even know about that.
You and Walker should do some trading.
Well, Larry has to buy I Am Legend.
The things I do for the show.
It was interesting, too. I was reading an interview with Charlton Heston from back in about 2001, and some of the stuff he was saying about filming this, and the interviewer was like, well, it must have been really hard to, get the streets all deserted like that. And he was like, oh, no, you just go down to LA, the city center on like a Sunday, and there's nobody around. And I was thinking, maybe that was true in 1971, but I don't think that's true nowadays. Most places are open 7 days a week. Back in the day, like Sundays and holidays, people closed their stores. But now, forget it. Everything's open, all the time. But apparently that was their method. They'd go down early on a Sunday morning and just, block off a couple streets and easy peasy.
Yeah. Now, Sunday mornings in LA, everybody's buying their Carmelos, Lotto, all those fancy coffee drinks and juices at the juice bar.
Yeah. But I think of the three, this to me is the funnest of the three of them. I think it's just, it's not as depressing as the first one. Well, actually, it's not as depressing as either the first or the third one. It's just a lot more fun. It's almost like a video game.
Well, none of the films ends well for Morgan or Neville. But, this one is a lot more fun to watch, and just... the fact is that it was actually filmed in LA. The first movie, like I said, had a Gothic feel to it, in Italy. Well, I forget what part of Italy.
It was right outside Rome.
And, I like Vincent Price as an actor, but Charlton Heston really defined, Soylent Green, Omega Man, Planet of the Apes. I mean,
he has a gravitas. I mean,
he does.
He got to be Jesus in this, basically. At the end, he's in the Christ pose at the end, and his blood is going to save the world. I mean, come on, it's over the top. It's so over the top, but it's Charlton Heston. What do you expect?
It's Charlton Heston, exactly.
Well, I mean, even though it's over the top, I think it's exactly how a person would act in that situation. I mean, Vincent Price, he's like single-mindedly. He's out killing the vampires and trying to come up with a cure and all that. Even Will Smith was fairly concentrating on finding a cure. Heston's out, like I say, watching movies and driving cars and, having a blast until the sun goes down. Sometimes he was having too much fun and it'd be like, oh, the sun's going down. I got to get home.
One of the things that kind of strikes me too with the burning pits in the Vincent Price film, and that was how many years after World War II, it kind of made me think of the concentration camps and how they would just dump the bodies into pits like that, and just the horror of it. With the Omega Man, it was, the 70s. It was counterculture. It was Vietnam. I don't know if Watergate had happened yet. Not yet, but we were heading down that path. So maybe just the world around us as we watch that film in the context of history kind of hits differently than I Am Legend or Last Man on Earth.
Well, I mean, it was still a lot of anti-establishment, counterculture type things back in 71. It didn't quite get into the polyester suits and disco era. It was still in the still in the thumb your nose to authority era.
Yeah, it was, drive, man, drive. Get on the motor scooter.
I'll tell you what, the Blu-ray looks great, but in those scenes on the motorcycle, it's so obvious that that's a stunt double for Heston. It's just so... That's one thing about when you go to high definition, all the stuff they used to get away with, it's like,
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's funny because if you're going to get a stunt guy, you might as well at least try to get the hairstyle right. And this guy had the puffy hair and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was totally different.
I was watching it, right? The guy looks down. He's not looking at the camera. He shows the top of his head.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
All right, kids. Any last words on the Omega Man?
Fun
all
movie.
Right. Well, that's... Oh, were you going to say something, Walker?
I just said fun movie. That was all.
Yeah.
And yes, I will add that I did see it in the theater when it came out.
There you go.
I did not see Last Man on Earth in the theater.
Okay.
But I did see Omega Man.
You would have been too wee a lad to see Last Man on Earth in the theater.
Omega Man, I was like 11.
Must have made an impression on you.
Well, I mean, like I say, Charlton Heston at that time did, because between Planet of the Apes and Omega Man and Soylent Green and, all that. Earthquake, that was another one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He was...
He was in the Towering Inferno, wasn't he? Or is that...
No, I don't think he was in that. But
yeah, no, I'm thinking of someone else.
But no,
he did another disaster movie, but it was like 2 minute... Was it 2 Minute Warning? I forget. You know what?
But I mean, he was all over back then.
What kind of cheesed me off when I was doing some research for this is I came across some forum and people were making fun of Charlton Heston's physique in this. And it's like, look, back in those days, actors didn't have to all lift weights and have dietitians and nutritionists and all this other, everybody didn't have to look like muscle men,
Right.
It's like, yeah, he was probably looked like a pretty fit, almost 50-year-old guy for that time. He was a tall, kind of lanky dude. But it just blows my mind the kind of conceits people put on films from 30, 40, 50 years ago, whatever, and people. It's like, people didn't go to the gym back then. Only people who were lifting weights, bodybuilders went to the gym. It's like not everybody had outrageous six-packs and stuff. It was just, I don't know, the lack of perspective just killed me.
Well, I mean, they're just comparing it to what they see today.
Exactly.
Whereas, every movie's a product of its time, and that's kind of how you have to look at it.
Yeah, I don't have much to say on that.
All right, Maestro.
It would have been interesting, though, to have, I mean, Heston, it was almost like, he played Moses, but he was like an action hero for the time. I mean, think of Schwarzenegger, and then, you look at Schwarzenegger's physique and how he's all bulked up. It wasn't his acting or his gravitas that got him the roles. It was that they needed someone to look like a barbarian.
Well, it's funny because for I Am Legend, when it was in development for several years, Schwarzenegger and Ridley Scott were attached to it. They were going to have Schwarzenegger star in I Am Legend, and I don't know what happened. It fell apart. But he was seriously connected to it, and that might have been an interesting. Of course, it would have just been like crazy action movie.
It would have been interesting. I'll tell you, at some point we should either offline or on the podcast talk about how would Schwarzenegger have done in some of the roles that Heston was in, and how would Heston do in a role like Conan, and just the acting. And
well, he didn't have the physique though.
Well, but yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, if you were to, act out whatever, I mean...
I would love to see Arnold stand on the cliff and, as the Red Sea parts,
what about Arnold in Planet of the Apes?
That I could almost see,
Yeah, but they'd be trying to catch him and he'd just be beating the crap out of all of them.
He'd be punching out gorillas and stuff.
Pulling arms out and slap them over the head with them.
Get your dirty paws off me, you damn dirty ape. Oh, God. At the end of the movie, damn you all to hell. You did it. You finally did it. Okay. Let's jump in our time machine, Planet 8 time machine, because your mission commander is going to have too much fun with this.
Let's talk about the Fresh Prince.
Well, there you go. Now, 2007, and Will Smith. I like Will Smith. I think they did an interview with Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, and they were like, he's trying to become a star. And so someone, and I'm paraphrasing, but take the Will Smith route. You do a lighthearted comedy, then you do action adventure, then you do, so whatever Will Smith did to take him from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air to where he is now, he made a lot of right moves. I Am Legend was not one of them. No, I'm just kidding.
I like the first part of that movie. It starts out well, but then it goes horribly wrong once the creatures are introduced.
Well, I can tell you exactly where it went wrong.
Chief?
They killed off the best actor in the whole film.
Oh,
the dog. Once the dog dies, they lose me. That was it.
Yep.
That was horrible.
And I will say, in all three of the films, I did not shed a tear except for when the dog died. I mean, yeah, I think you're right, Bob. I think after that, it was like, man.
Well, the dog was really the one character you really cared about.
He helped keep Will Smith safe, sane. You know, there's, in my opinion, and I love my wife and I love you guys too, but there's no better companion than a dog. So loyal, so loving. Yeah.
Although you could almost argue that it blunted the feeling of loneliness that he had, because he had the dog as a companion. And then almost immediately after the dog dies, the woman and the kids show up.
Right.
So I don't know that I ever felt like he was as alone as the other two characters, the other two men.
Well, Vincent Price, I mean, he's alone, and then he sees the dog.
Yeah.
And that's probably 3 years into his solitude. And he sees this dog outside his house, and then unfortunately he brings it in and, you know, nurses it back to health, takes a blood test, and it's infected.
Yeah.
So, you know, he probably had the dog maybe a few nights or something, but...
that didn't hit me that hard, though. You know, probably because of the lack of time and the amount of film time that the pet had. But I think Will Smith did a real good job. It wasn't I hadn't had chance to watch the movie like you guys, but where he's like, I don't know if it's a clothing store or a video store, and he's talking to people and asking them to, not people, but mannequins, asking them to respond to him. And he really showed the mind games that solitude can play on people. And I think there are different personality types. Some people do better alone, and some people do not. I have a real good friend. He will be in the crappiest relationship just to be able to say he's in a relationship, to his detriment. So I don't.
Well, I think I thought Will Smith did a pretty good job. I thought the scene with the dog, where he had to put the dog down, was maybe the best scene acting wise he had in the movie. And I thought the mannequins were kind of a callback to Omega Man, because we had all the scenes where Charlton Heston was sort of talking at the mannequins. But I think, Will Smith, it was a pretty good film on his part, but I never felt all that much compassion for him. I don't know what it was, you know, except like when he lost the dog, and then I felt bad, but I felt more bad for the dog.
Well, then, talk about the mannequins. It is a pretty shocking scene. He's got that one mannequin with a hoodie on that's outside the video store every day that he goes to the video store, and then suddenly he goes somewhere and it's standing in another place.
Right, and he's trying to figure out,
what are you doing here? And trying to figure out if he's real. Yeah.
Right, he was really
and it was like blurring the lines between fantasy and reality. It's like, is he real? Did he walk over here? If not, who? Because if you think about it, the vampires, quote unquote, in I Am Legend are just these feral human beings for the most part. And it's not till later in the movie where you see one of them looks like he's starting to plot and plan and do some stuff. But for the most part, they're just running around and crazed and attacking. So he wouldn't think that they would actually move a mannequin, let alone use it for bait and set a trap.
Yeah, I had a hard time believing that.
Well, they learned from him. I mean, wasn't he trapping them? And, you know, it's kind of like the next evolutionary step is, you know, mimicking. And they got him good, too. You know, they got him real good. In that trap. But losing his family, too. Oh, and I forgot to mention with Charlton Heston, that helicopter goes down pretty fast. And when it hits, it bursts into this flame ball, but he's okay off to the side, so I guess at the last minute he was ejected or something.
He's Chuck Heston.
It is Chuck Heston.
He can survive that stuff. But he was also the only of the three characters that we never really saw his family.
Yeah.
Never really saw his background other than, you know, leading up to the helicopter crash and all that.
Right. Military man. Maybe he had no family because of his military career.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a fair point. One of the other things I liked about the Will Smith film was just being able to play golf wherever. I mean, you build routines into your life. That's taking a sidestep here. The character of John Dory over on the Fear the Walking Dead. He had a routine of going to the video store. Was it like a Market, Bob, or a video store, or both?
Yeah, and he'd actually sign out the movies on a little clipboard on the wall, and he'd initial that he took it.
Right, it's going alphabetically through the films.
Yeah. You watched the Fear the Walking Dead, Walker?
I think I saw the first season.
Oh, okay. I love
it. Totally changed.
Dory. It's really gone.
Dory was great. And, Dory's like the German Shepherd, though. As soon as they killed him off, man, there you go, Bob. That was it.
There you go. So, spoiler alert.
But I will say there is a connection between Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead and Last Man on Earth.
Last Man, yes.
And that is Morgan, who's named after Robert Morgan.
Morgan. God, that's so chilling to me. Yes, and Morgan is one of my favorite characters in The Walking Dead as well, but I digress.
One of the things, though, you guys were talking about, the creatures set that trap for him. I think of the three films, that's the thing that's the least satisfying is the creatures. Not just that the CGI is just the shittiest CGI ever, but, I mean, we're talking Scorpion King.
I was going to say, you're including Scorpion King in that, right?
Yeah, it's on the same level. It's so bad, and it's not just the creatures, but even the scenes with the deer and the lions. I mean, it's just terrible.
I was kind of thinking about that, when we were messaging about it earlier, and I'm looking at these vampires, creatures, whatever you want to call them, and they have they'll look in the camera and their mouths will extend much further than they should be able to.
Cartoony.
And talking of Scorpion King, we just watched the Brendan Fraser Mummy recently.
Yeah.
And he does the same thing, opens his mouth wide, but it looks actually better in the Mummy than it did in I Am Legend. Even though I Am Legend was almost 5-6 years after the Mummy.
Yeah. Well, they said that they had filmed people. They had put people in makeup and filmed them running around, but they weren't satisfied with how they looked. But Jesus, I don't know how you can be satisfied with the CGI. I'd rather see real effects than what they wound up with. It was so jarring. I remember in the theater, once they showed those things, I just couldn't get back into the movie. It was just, I couldn't, concentrate because it was just took me out of the film.
Well, I mean, they definitely illustrate my main complaint about a lot of CGI, especially early CGI, is they don't have any weight.
Yeah.
They're just gliding over the ground, and they almost look transparent in some scenes. And I harken back to the old effects by Bird Eye Gordon, where he would do the matte shots, and every once in a while the character in the foreground would look transparent. But in this one, CG, and they look like they're not all there.
Well, and they're also the least interesting of all of them, because in Last Man on Earth, you've got the ones going out to Morgan, and they're tormenting him, and he can sort of interact with them. And the same thing with Omega Man, he can interact, he can have conversations with the family, and they have plans, they plot against him and stuff. These things just run around and tear things up, and they're not very interesting. There's just not much there to grab your attention.
Well, it's there's no hope for humanity.
Yeah.
Right. You can't see any evolution or any change. It just,
it really takes you out of the movie. I mean, same with a Scorpion King, when you see something that you really shouldn't be looking at. It's there's this one movie where Harvey Keitel shows his penis, and it just bam, I'm out. I just...
Yeah, that would definitely take me out of the movie.
That's it. I don't know, and I feel that the end of I Am Legend just didn't have the satisfaction that the other two films had, especially Omega Man. I mean, it was over the top, and the blood of Christ and all that stuff, but I don't know. And look, Will Smith is a decent actor. I like a number of his films that he's done over the years, but for some reason this just didn't. Do you think at some point that because it's based on a Matheson story and I Am Legend is just so such an iconic property, the novel to the films to even, there's been some TV shows. Last Man on Earth was a comedy on Fox for a while.
IDW did a comic book on it.
I was going to ask if you guys knew if someone did a comic book of this story. Do you think it just gets hard to play off the gravitas of the story? And they are actually, I Am Legend, they did screw up on the CGI. I mean, I think that's just off in there.
I think it's going to be harder to do this story now after we're all living through a pandemic, because all these things now, after going through COVID and everything, have a slightly different cast to them than they did before, because you can relate to certain things, this concept of like, some virus wiping out civilization, that's really a fantasy. It's kind of like, oh well, maybe it's not so fantasy. Or the concept of isolation, it's like, oh yeah.
I've made this point before. You've always watched Night of the Living Dead or zombie movies or whatever, or Last Man on Earth, and it's like, well, how did society fall if we have a means to fight the virus? And I probably we shouldn't bring politics into Planet 8, but society fell because not everyone chose to get vaccinated, or the vaccination was not a true vaccination. I mean, either side of the aisle that you sit on, but that's a potential end. I think it would be more interesting now, even Planet of the Apes. How did, in the remake of the Planet of the Apes, they have that end scene where they show ground zero for the plague and how it just spreads around the earth, in a number of days or weeks, however long. I think it's more plausible and more understandable to us as a society now, globally, because COVID has touched every part of the earth.
Even like movies like the Andromeda Strain and things, it's like,
it's another good one.
It could really happen. Now you got to go back and look at those in a whole different light.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, trust me, guys, no matter what you do, you don't want to see Harvey Keitel's pee-pee. So avoid that and you're going to be okay. Let me see. Any final words on the I Am Legend movie?
Bob, do you want to mention that alternate ending? Because I think I know what you're talking about.
In the original novel, Neville is basically captured, and by the living that were infected and had minds. He was captured and he was put in a cell, and then the woman that he brought in, who actually turned out to be a spy for the vampires. She goes to talk to him, and he realizes that he's going to be executed. And in being executed, he was going to be like a martyr, or he'd be a quote legend. And she gives him the out. She gives him these drugs that he could take to kill himself. And so he actually ends up killing himself in the cell, so he's not made an example of out in public. But supposedly there's an alternate ending, and I think you can see it on YouTube. You can see anything on YouTube. There's an alternate ending of the movie I Am Legend that is more closer to what happened in the novel than what actually came on screen, which is just him grabbing a grenade and running out and blowing everybody up.
I wonder if it would have really made any kind of a difference to the overall feel of the film.
Well, I know one thing I had read was that they'd considered an ending where Will Smith's character would have lived, but that just doesn't seem to have the right feel. It just feels like he has to sacrifice himself. Like all of these characters, well, the other two characters die. So it just seems, I don't know, it seems fitting somehow.
Well, yeah, all three discover a cure and then die before that cure can get out. Although, was it Omega Man? I think he hands the vial, right, to the survivors.
Yeah, he hands it over
before he's killed. And even Will Smith hands his vial over to the woman he was staying with as she was going back to her society.
Right.
So potentially they save the world before they die. It's interesting to look at all the similarities and the differences and stuff, but all very different as far as the tone and feel.
Very true. Well, until we get another movie, I think that's going to do it for this episode, which brings us to our censor sweep this episode. Karen, you have the censor sweep. What have you got for us, buddy?
Well, fittingly, I dug out my CD. These were these little metal discs that had music on them. We used to insert them into machines. And
an actual CD disc?
Yes. This is the motion picture soundtrack for the Omega Man. It's the Omega Man 2.0 Unlimited. This was put out by Film Score Monthly magazine. Oh my God, I think this was from 2010? Something like that. It was funny. I had a little discussion on Twitter with my pal and Planet 8 friend Bill about this CD, which apparently is now kind of hard to get. It differs from, some of the soundtracks you can get of Omega Man. This one has 18 tracks, over an hour of music, a lot of cues that apparently you can't get on the regular soundtrack album, and some that weren't included in the film, because there was a scene that involved Lisa finding a family member in the crypt with a baby. So there's music from that. So anyway, it's just a really, really great sounding soundtrack with a ton of music on it. So if you want to tootle around Los Angeles like the Omega Man, like Chuck Heston, rent yourself a Mustang and cruise around, get your hands on this soundtrack. Now, I don't know how much you're going to pay for it, though. This was a limited edition. At the time, I can't remember if I got it from Film Score Monthly Direct or how I got my hands on it. I didn't pay a ton for it, but I looked it up. I saw on Amazon it was going for $100, so I don't know what fixed.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's a great soundtrack, and I just think it's such a cool. It's definitely a very 70s soundtrack, but it's a very cool soundtrack.
And I think that was in the 70s before, actually, I guess the 80s when they started doing the synthesizer stuff. So this was this was more orchestral, right?
Yeah, it's very orchestral. He has some, I think they said some water chimes in there, and there is a little bit of electronic music in there, I think, at a point. It's an interesting, it's percussive too, which I always like in my soundtracks. Although I don't know if you guys saw Dune. Wow, that is a strange percussive atonal soundtrack, but that's a whole nother story.
Is this the new Dune?
The new Dune.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I was not really impressed with the first Dune, so I had no real interest in the second Dune or the new Dune.
The new Dune.
Isn't it on like HBO Max or something?
Yeah, but you should see it in a theater. It's really, visually and the sound production, very impressive. I still couldn't care less about any of the characters, but well, that's how I felt about the novel. I'm just being honest here, guys.
Just go watch the special effects. Forget the acting.
Watch it and listen to it. Get a big tub of popcorn and turn your brain off. Yeah.
Well, we're going to go see Eternals this weekend, so no Dune for me.
Yeah, I think that's my plan, too.
Yeah, I still have to catch up on Venom and then Eternals.
Yeah, I'm going to skip Venom.
Yeah, I don't know. I've seen all the other Marvel stuff. I might as well see Venom, I guess.
There you go.
I'm waiting for for it to come to streaming.
Although I did see No Time to Die.
Nice.
I did see that as well.
Which I loved.
Very good, sir.
I have not seen it.
Well, you got a lot of catching up to do, Commander.
I went into the movie with some trepidations, but I came out loving it.
That's good. Well, there you go. You have a bonus movie reviews. Planet 8. Hey, guys, we appreciate you for supporting us, listening to us, liking us over on YouTube. Be part of our Facebook world, part of our Twitter world. Stay safe, and until we meet up again, peace out.
On that note, this will conclude this transmission from Planet 8. We would like to thank all of our intergalactic audience for listening. Be sure to head on over to our website at www.planet8podcast.com, where you can get more information on this episode's topic.
For more conversation, find us on Twitter at Planet8Cast.
Or on Facebook at facebook.com/Planet8Podcast.
We want to thank you guys for tuning in each and every episode. We look forward to your input and opinions. Until next time, this is Planet 8 signing off. End transmission.
By George, he's got it. It is the end.
At it again, I see. What'll it be tonight? Museum of Science? Some library? Poor miserable bastards.